Welcome back to Dark Infidelity Stories. Before we begin, let me ask you something uncomfortable. How does someone betray the person they love and still sleep at night believing they were justified? Tonight's story isn't about clear villains or easy heroes. It's about rationalization, the quiet lies people tell themselves until the wrong choice starts to feel inevitable. Consider this a guided walk through the cheater's mindset. A place where guilt gets negotiated, boundaries blur, and one excuse appears at every turn. I was lonely. You've heard it before. Maybe you've even accepted it once. This is the confession of a woman who cheated on her husband of 12 years and paid for it with everything she thought was secure. She says the anger doesn't surprise her anymore. The judgment was expected. What hurts is watching the man she once called her forever move on, stronger, successful, and building a new life, while she's left drowning in the aftermath of her own decisions. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about infidelity. It's about the moment excuses stop working and consequences finally arrive. She's 39, female. Her ex-husband, Mark, is 43. They were married for 12 years and together even longer. 2 children, a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. They married young, fresh out of college, full of plans and optimism. And by her own admission, Mark was everything people hope for in a partner. Calm, supportive, gentle. He never raised his voice, never disrespected her, never made the kids feel unsafe or unheard. They were what most people would call a perfect family. Both worked full-time. Mark was a service engineer. She worked in marketing. Life was busy but manageable until her second pregnancy. That's when the balance started to crack. Raising a toddler while pregnant, working full-time, constantly exhausted, it began to take a toll. And around the same time, Mark co-founded a startup with a close friend. On top of his regular job, it consumed nearly all his remaining energy. Household chores and childcare slowly fell onto her shoulders. Eventually, she quit her job. On paper, the arrangement made sense. She would handle the home and the kids. Mark would focus on work and finances. And at first it felt like relief. No deadlines, no meetings, no constant pressure. She could be present with her children, move at a slower pace, breathe. She told herself she was lucky. But here's the first quiet lesson this story teaches. Relief without purpose can slowly turn into resentment. The calm didn't last. Days blended together. Her world shrank. And as Mark worked longer hours building a future he believed in, she began to feel smaller inside her own life. Lonely, not physically alone but emotionally disconnected. Mark wasn't absent in the obvious ways. He still came home, kissed the kids goodnight, checked in. But after dinner the laptop came out. Nights were spent working. Weekends disappeared into calls, meetings, and the startup office. When she complained, Mark said what many driven partners say, that he was doing it for the family, for the kids. He grew up with very little. He didn't want his children to struggle the way he had. And financially, he delivered. They moved into a bigger house, enrolled the kids in private school, took vacations, bought a new SUV. From the outside they were thriving. But emotionally she felt starved. She didn't want more money. She didn't want future promises. She wanted time, presence, the old weekends on the couch, talking, laughing, ordering pizza, doing absolutely nothing together. Mark promised it would come back, once the company scaled, once things stabilized. But to her, that future felt unreachable, and impatience began to replace understanding. Every attempt to talk turned into an argument. Mark would ask if she wanted a better life for the kids. He reminded her he was there, just busy. And to be fair, when he was present, he tried. He listened. He showed affection. But his time was limited. That limitation became the breeding ground for resentment. A year passed like this. Then one ordinary morning changed everything. At a cafe near the park where she walked daily, a man in his late 20s struck up a conversation. He joked about her ordering the same coffee every day. His name was Ryan, a PhD student from the nearby university, often working on his research at the cafe. He'd noticed her long before she noticed him. They started talking. Then talking turned into routine. Coffee became ritual. And without fully admitting it to herself, she began to look forward to those conversations more than she looked forward to going home. She didn't tell Mark, and that silence mattered. She dressed nicer, smiled more, felt noticed again. Ryan listened, really listened, remembered details, asked questions, treated her like an individual, not a role. A month later, he invited her to his apartment to taste test a new pasta recipe. She laughed it off and went anyway. His place was small, cluttered, filled with jazz music and youthful chaos. They ate, drank wine, laughed, and for a moment she forgot who she was supposed to be. When he kissed her, guilt hit instantly, sharp and overwhelming. She pulled away, reminded him she was married. He apologized, but she didn't leave. That hesitation, that pause, was the real point of no return. They sat in silence. And then she said the sentence that destroyed her marriage. "It's not like my husband would ever notice." That was the moment the affair truly began. She told herself it would be the last time. Every time. Guilt followed each encounter, but so did desire. And soon, she convinced herself of something markedly common. That unmet emotional needs justify betrayal. She wasn't lacking intimacy at home. What she wanted was attention, time, validation. And Ryan provided it, in exchange for her. For months she lived two lives. At home she played the devoted wife, cooked meals, packed lunches, held everything together. Mark came home exhausted, thanked her, and believed she finally understood his sacrifices. Her confidence grew. Her caution disappeared. She even started bringing Ryan into their home, after school drop-offs, during nap time, telling herself it was harmless, controlled, safe. Until it wasn't. One afternoon, footsteps echoed from the back door. Before either of them could react, Mark stood frozen in the hallway. The truth was undeniable. She scrambled. Ryan pulled away. She grabbed a robe and rushed toward Mark, but he didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He walked out. Barefoot, half-dressed, she chased him to the driveway. He never looked back. He got into his car and drove away. That silence was louder than any confrontation. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. Ryan disappeared from her life instantly, forgotten, irrelevant. Her only focus was her husband. Mark didn't come home that night. She learned he was sleeping at the startup office. She sent hundreds of messages, begging for a conversation. None were answered. She told herself he'd cool down, that he'd miss her, that love would win. 2 days later he returned. She ran toward him, but he brushed past her, heading straight to the kids' rooms. He spoke to them gently, calmly, as if nothing had happened. That's when the weight of what she'd done finally crushed her. When they were alone, she broke down, sobbed, begged, justified, explained, rationalized, admitted guilt. And deep down she knew the truth. Some betrayals don't explode marriages, they quietly erase them. And once respect is gone, love rarely survives. I was ready to do anything to save what we had left, but by then he wasn't listening anymore. His silence was unbearable. I wished he would scream, shout, accuse me of everything I deserved. Instead, he looked at me with eyes so cold they barely felt human and said calmly, almost rehearsed, "I've already spoken to my lawyer. You'll receive the papers soon." I completely lost control. Panic took over. I begged him not to do this. I told him none of it mattered, that the affair meant nothing, that I deserved another chance. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He quietly packed a few essentials into a bag. I stood in his way, pleaded, cried, promised everything. Nothing stopped him. As he walked out, he turned back only once and said, "You can stay in the house until the kids are older. We'll have joint custody." That was it. No discussion. No negotiation. I realized then that he hadn't just decided, he had planned. He had already arranged a therapist for our son. He told me we'd tell him together. I begged him not to do it, hoping delay might soften his resolve. He didn't budge. Said if I refused, he'd go alone. I had no choice. The next evening, he picked us up and drove us to family therapy. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Mark sat there calm and composed while I kept breaking down every few minutes. My guilt was unbearable. I knew I had shattered my children's sense of safety, their idea of family. Mark explained to our son that mommy and daddy loved them deeply but needed space, that we'd still be a family, just not under the same roof. Our little boy cried. He begged us to stay together. He was barely 5. He asked if we were still married. Mark answered immediately without hesitation. No, buddy. But no matter what happens between adults, you and your sister come first. We'll always be your parents. The therapist took him aside and I grabbed Mark's hand, begging him one last time to reconsider. For the first time in days, I saw emotion cross his face. His eyes filled as he said softly, "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I clung to that moment like hope. I convinced myself he would forgive me once the anger faded. He never did. When the official divorce papers arrived, it felt like the world stopped spinning. I called him in a panic. No answer. I texted endlessly, begging him to talk, to come home. Silence. 2 days later, he came to pick up the kids. I blocked the door, crying, telling him 12 years couldn't be thrown away over one mistake. I promised I'd do anything to fix it. He said quietly, "I can't look at you without seeing that moment." That sentence destroyed me. He didn't hate me, and that was worse. Hate would have meant emotion. What he felt was emptiness. That's when I understood something painful but important. When trust dies completely, love doesn't turn into anger, it turns into nothing. I signed every paper he put in front of me. The months that followed were torture. The house felt haunted. Friends and family learned the truth. No one confronted me directly, but I felt the judgment everywhere. Invitations stopped. Whispers followed. The only people still kind to me were his parents, and only for the kids. Mark remained an incredible father. He visited multiple times a week, took them for ice cream, parks, playdates. He was cheerful with them, polite with me, but distant. Our communication became purely logistical. Pickup times, school bags, fevers. Every time his name flashed on my phone, my heart jumped, hoping for more. Once I called him just to hear his voice. When he answered, I said softly that the kids were fine. I just missed him. He hung up without a word. At mediation, he was composed and decisive. He insisted I keep the house until the younger child moved out. He covered the mortgage, taxes, school fees, everything. 50-50 custody. My lawyer suggested fighting for more. I knew better. If I pushed, he could have destroyed me legally. I agreed. That night, I removed my wedding ring. The pale mark it left felt permanent, like a scar. 3 years have passed. Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could undo everything. I work part-time now, trying to stay busy. My life feels hollow. Ryan vanished completely. Blocked me. A year later, I ran into him at a grocery store. He looked straight through me like I was nothing. That's when it hit me. I destroyed my life for something meaningless. Mark's life flourished. His startup exploded. He quit his job. Built something incredible. Bought a beautiful new house with a pool and a garden. The kids adore it. They come home talking about movie rooms, glowing pool lights, and Erica. Yes, he has a girlfriend now. And that's the part that hurts the most. She turned out to be his legal consultant at the company, about a decade younger than him. The kids had been casually mentioning her name for months before I ever met her. At first, I forced myself not to spiral. Of course, he'd date again eventually. He's attractive, successful, emotionally steady, and carries that quiet confidence women naturally gravitate toward. Still, every time her name slipped out of my kids' mouths, it hit me right in the gut. Dad and Erica took us to the aquarium. Dad made pancakes with Erica this morning. Mom, Erica says I have your eyes. Each sentence felt like a small cut. I smiled, nodded, pretended I was fine, because what else could I do? The moment that shattered me came when I finally saw them together. It was after our son's parent-teacher conference. Mark and I had both attended, like responsible co-parents. Everything went smoothly. We walked out together, discussing school schedules, upcoming breaks. For a brief second, I felt almost normal. Then suddenly his face changed. It lit up with a smile I hadn't seen since before our divorce. I instinctively smiled back, foolishly thinking it was meant for me. Maybe he was about to say something kind. Instead, he waved across the street. I turned and saw her pulling up in a sleek white Tesla, sunglasses on, hair pulled into a perfectly polished low ponytail. Confident. Put together. Effortless. Mark turned to me and said calmly, "I'll pick up the kids on Saturday. I've got to go." That was it. Before I could respond, he crossed the street, wrapped her in a hug, kissed her cheek, and they both waved at the kids before driving off. No introduction. No acknowledgement of who I was to him. I stood there watching them disappear, realizing something devastating. That used to be me. The way he looked at her, proud, warm, relaxed, that was once reserved for me. When I got home, the pain came in waves so intense I could barely breathe. I cried until my chest hurt. It's a cruel realization when you understand that no amount of regret can rewind time. I traded something sacred for something meaningless, and now I was standing outside the life I once built, watching someone else live it. This isn't an update. This is my reality now. Every family event has become a quiet form of torture. Next came my daughter's Mark's recital. When I arrived, they were already seated in the front row, laughing, whispering together. Mark noticed me and offered a polite wave with a shallow smile. Nothing more. When the kids came on stage, they jumped to their feet, clapping like the proudest parents alive. I stood several rows back, filming on my phone, alone. After the performance, I waited near the exit. They arrived hand in hand. This time, he introduced her confidently. "This is Erica, my girlfriend." Then he turned to me and said, "This is Laura, the kid's mother. Not ex-wife, not partner, just a role." My daughter ran into his arms, then hugged Erica and squealed, "You came." Erica smiled warmly and replied, "Of course, sweetheart. We wouldn't miss it." I had to turn away before my face betrayed me. Thanksgiving came next. His parents still invite me, mostly for the kids' sake. I almost didn't go, but au revoir Marks doesn't heal anything. I told myself maybe seeing them together would finally push me forward. When I arrived, Erica was already in the kitchen, wearing my old apron. The one I'd worn every Thanksgiving for 12 years. Mark's mom beamed. "She's such a help. You wouldn't believe how organized she is." I smiled, complimented her, then dropped a fork because my hands were shaking too badly to hold it. During dinner, Erica fit in effortlessly. Laughing, refilling glasses, leaning her head on Mark's shoulder when he joked. His father toasted to new beginnings. I excused myself midway through dessert and cried behind the garage like a teenager. They looked genuinely happy. Mark is still polite but distant. He's at peace. I'm not. I can see he's in love again, not because he says it, but because of the quiet details. The ease in his voice, the calm on his face, the way he speaks about her without even realizing it. That hurts more than anger ever could. I try to be happy for him. I really do. He deserves love. Sometimes I wonder if things would be different if I'd spoken up about my loneliness instead of escaping it. If I'd chosen therapy over secrecy, patience over impulse. Now he has a new house, a new partner, a new life. And I'm here carrying guilt like a second skin. I work constantly just to stay afloat, exhausted, anxious, terrified of what the future holds. I don't even trust myself to date. Feels wrong, like cheating all over again. I still love him. I love him so deeply it hurts. But he doesn't look at me anymore. He looks at her. And that's the consequence I have to live with. Here's the truth I learned the hardest way possible. Mark isn't punishing me by moving on and living well. He's doing what people do after they've been betrayed beyond repair. He protects himself, and he places his heart where it finally feels safe. If healing is ever going to happen, I have to stop calling this a mistake. This wasn't an accident. It was a series of conscious choices, repeated again and again, until I was caught. There's no way forward without owning that, fully. So tell me this, do cheaters actually believe their own excuses? Or are they just hoping everyone else is as confused as they are? If stories like this resonate with you, raw, uncomfortable, and honest, thank you for spending your time with Dark Infidelity Stories. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.